Hello students, welcome to the third part of enzymology lecture. Now if you have not seen the first and the second part, I strongly recommend you to go and watch them and then come back here because we will be continuing exactly where we left in class number 2. That is, we completed the reversible type of enzyme inhibition and we stopped our discussion up till uncompetitive reversible inhibition. So today we will be starting with irreversible inhibition and we will be going forward to other mechanism of enzyme activity. Now this whole enzymology belongs to competency 2.1. Alright, so specifically we are covering BI 2.4. It says describe and discuss enzyme inhibitors and poison and drugs that act as therapeutic enzymes. And we will also cover BI 2.3, which says describe and explain the basic principles of enzyme activity. So 2.3 and 2.4 we are continuing in our today's lesson. So we move on to irreversible inhibition. Now what is irreversible inhibition? Very simple. Once inhibited, the enzyme cannot recover. In all reversible type of inhibition, there was some chance of recovering the enzyme activity, whether partly or fully in case of competitive and partly in case of uncompetitive and non-competitive varieties of inhibition. So inhibitors bind covalently, very important. This is the key word here. Covalently, inhibitor binds to the enzyme's active site. What happens? Active site is modified and catalytic activity is destroyed permanently. The change cannot be reversed. Okay. So how can it happen? Either functional group destruction, okay, or stable non-covalent adduct formation. It forms such a stable unnecessary compound that will prevent the action of enzyme. Okay, so they can be of two types. Many sources will also consider suicide inhibition in irreversible inhibition. Okay, so depending on your textbook, you may choose to write in that way, but I would suggest the suicide inhibition to classify as a different type of inhibition than reversible and irreversible. If you generally speak, it has got all the characteristic of irreversible inhibition, right? So either you can classify suicide inhibition as a separate type of inhibition, or you can club that together with irreversible inhibition. So that will make three types of irreversible inhibition. So the first, the two that I always teach in my classes, number one are group specific reagents that inhibits irreversibly, and next are affinity labels. Also these are actually substrate analogs. They actually look like substrate and they bind to competitive enzyme active site. I mean enzyme active site. Please omit the word competitive. If I used competitive, that was a slip of tongue. Anyway, so group specific reagents, the examples include diisopropyl fluorophosphate, DIFP, and iodoacetate. There are many, but you should consider these two as a first year student. Mind it, this is often written as DIPF, diisopropyl phosphofluorate, okay, phosphatidyl fluorate, whatever. The main action these two exert, okay, is by attacking the serine residues, okay. They are very important. This iodoacetate can alkyl cysteine residue, and DIFP, they attack the serine residue. So the mechanism of action of these are group specific, serine for this and cysteine for this. However, when we look at TPCK, that is tosyl phenylalanine chloromethyl ketone, you don't need to remember that big name. Alright, simply remember TPCK as a chymotrypsin inhibitor. What specialty does it do? Okay, it actually has got some structural resemblance with the substrate of chymotrypsin. Right? What is chymotrypsin? It is a proteolytic enzyme. Definitely, it's an enzyme, so it will have an active site where the substrate will bind. This TPCK binds to that enzyme site, being a structural analog, and irreversibly inhibits the enzyme. Minded, the mechanism may appear to be very similar to competitive inhibition. In competitive inhibition, the inhibitor is substrate analog and binds with the active site. Here also the inhibitor is substrate analog and it is binding at the active site, but competitive is a reversible type of inhibition. This is irreversible. Here covalent binding occurs, okay, of TPCK to the active site of chymotrypsin. Hence, these are example of irreversible inhibition. Examiner might try to confuse you with affinity levels and comparing it with competitive. He or she will definitely try to test your knowledge and confidence by intentionally, I would say, misleading you or testing you by saying in this type of inhibition, it is similar to the substrate in structure, it is binding to the active site. So what type of inhibition is this? Mind it, don't fall into that trap. It is a type of irreversible. If it would have been reversible, it would have straight become a competitive variety of inhibition. Right. Next, we move on to suicide inhibition. Right. So what is suicide inhibition? Here, the inhibitor is modified substrate. So how the substrate will be modified? It will be modified by the enzyme only. So let's look into it. The inhibitor binds to the enzyme active site, which is actually substrate. Okay. The substrate is modified and then it becomes the inhibitor. So first the substrate will bind to the enzyme active site. Initially, the reaction will start like normal catalytic mechanism. Means initially the enzyme substrate will act as if nothing is happening. However, the mechanism of catalysis, I mean during the reaction, it generates a chemically reactive intermediate that inactivates the enzyme through covalent modification. So you understand my point, right? In case of reversible and irreversible inhibition, the inhibitors start to inhibit the enzyme right from the beginning. Okay, this is different. Even if we compare irreversible inhibition with suicide inhibition, in case of irreversible inhibition, the inhibition starts right from time 0. As soon as you add the inhibitor, the enzyme will be irreversibly inhibited. Over here, it starts normally. Enzyme thinks as if it is a substrate and it continues to react until at some point of time the substrate will change into it will appear in its true form. Okay, and that form is poison that will bind covalently and that will inhibit the enzyme. This is an example of, this is the mechanism of suicide inhibition. How it is applicable to therapeutics? Generally we say in rational drug design to optimize drug specificity and reduce side effects. The drugs are designed in such a way that after some point of time they will inhibit either, or they can, what is a drug? Okay, a drug is something which utilizes the body's enzymes activity and it exerts something which the body does not want. Maybe it can be lowering of temperature or it can be anything. So many drugs act in this way. It first fools the enzyme thinking it to be a normal substrate of body. As soon as the enzyme binds it, then it changes to its active form and then it will inhibit the enzyme. Maybe that is an anti-inflammatory enzyme, anything, right? I hope you got the concept. For example, allopurinol is an example of suicide inhibitor. As I told you, anti-inflammatory. Aspirin is a cyclooxygenase inhibitor. Ornithine decarboxylase, monoamine oxidase inhibitor. So many drugs are actually acting by the mechanism of suicide inhibition. Okay. Next. So our enzyme inhibition is over. In previous class, we discussed reversible inhibition, in which we cleared about competitive, non-competitive and uncompetitive. Again, I am telling you, if you have not watched that previous episode, please go and watch it. And in this episode, we just covered irreversible inhibition and suicide inhibition. Now we move on to our next long question, that is regulation of enzyme activity. Mind it is the part of competency 2.3 as I showed you, and this will come as a long question or it may be asked in Viva or even MCQ, right? So first we need to look at what are the salient headings under which we need to classify our answer. Number 1 is regulation through conformational changes. Number 2, regulation through changes in amount of enzyme. And number 3, regulation of metabolic pathway. So any enzyme regulation will more or less occur via these 3 mechanisms. One or more of these 3 mechanisms, maybe all 3, right? So in case of conformational changes, what are the enzymes or what are the mechanism of regulation? Number 1, by allosteric activation or inactivation, that is by allosteric modulation. Next, by covalent modification, protein-protein interaction and proteolytic cleavage. Next, regulation in changes of amount of enzyme. This includes regulated synthesis of enzyme. The enzyme is regulated in that way so that its synthesis is controlling the ultimately downstream reaction of what the enzyme is doing, right? Next, regulated protein degradation. So synthesis and degradation in the amount of enzyme. Lastly, regulation of metabolic pathways. Okay, so the first and very important is regulation of rate limiting step. You should know by now, if you have at least started carbohydrate metabolism, or if you have gone through all the chapters in biochemistry, all the cycles, you will see there is something known as rate limiting step, which determines the checkpoint of those reactions. If we control that step, all of the downstream reactions will be controlled. So number one, regulation of rate limiting step. This is a very important regulation of metabolic pathways mechanism. Next, feedback inhibition, compartmentation, counter regulatory pathways, and tissue isoenzymes of regulatory enzymes. Okay, so we will discuss this one by one. First, allosteric regulation of enzyme activity, right? So what are allosteric regulators? Allosteric regulators can be positive or negative. So it can be activators or inhibitors. So allosteric activators and inhibitors, basically their mechanism is same. One is acting in a positive way and another is acting in a negative way. So what does it do? Allosteric effectors are compounds that bind to the allosteric site. Mind it, this is different from catalytic site. Okay, they bind to the allosteric site. That leads to a conformational change in the enzyme, okay, that affects the affinity of enzyme for the substrate. We will be showing you in a diagrammatic illustration very soon. So what happens? Just note these points or just understand. Generally, what are the properties of allosteric enzymes? Because if allosteric regulation is given as a short note, you need to mention all of these points and then you need to draw a diagram for full marks, and lastly give an example, of course. So usually allosteric enzyme has multiple interacting subunits, very important. Okay. Next, they exist in active and inactive conformation. Okay, it has to be present in active and inactive conformation based on their mechanism of acting. This is what happens. You will see the allosteric enzymes actually have got, let me tell you, a T state and an R state. One is active and one is inactive. So what does this allosteric effector do? They either promote or hinder conversion of one form to another. From active to inactive form, either it will speed up or it will stop. Next, the binding of one substrate to one subunit facilitates the binding of substrate to another unit. This is very important. This is known as cooperative binding. So once the reaction start, it will further enhance its own mechanism, own rate. Okay, up to a certain limit, after which it will start lowering down, and this will give rise to a sigmoid or S-shaped curve. This is very important, and this is known as cooperative binding. And lastly, as I told you, subunits in the conformation with low affinity for the substrate are called taut conformation or T, or they may be present with high affinity for substrate conformation, that is known as relaxed or R state. Remember, high affinity is actually relaxed. Okay, students often get confused. Low affinity means taut. Okay, so you can remember in that way, the one who is taut means onto himself is actually introvert. He has got no affinity for outside world, and relaxed means he is open to suggestions. So he is an extrovert, so he has got high affinity for all the substrate. Okay, that's how I remembered it, and that's the way how you can choose to remember. Anyway, now this figure shows the cooperative binding property of allosteric enzymes. Okay, that is, if one substrate binds, it will favor the binding of other substrates. For example, this enzyme can bind to 4 subunits of substrate. So one unit binding is promoting activity of binding of other 3 substrate to the enzyme. Okay, so this is an example of positive cooperative binding, and this is a very important characteristic of allosteric enzyme. Now, if we look at the diagrammatic representation, mind one thing. As I told you in the previous slide, R means high affinity for substrate. So it means when the enzyme has got high affinity, it is looking for positive modulation, that is plus, okay, increasing the activity. And whenever the enzyme is looking for inhibition, it will always attain a conformation of taut, that is low affinity, right? With this example, let us move forward. So here we take an example of positive allosteric modulator, a substrate, and an allosteric enzyme, right? Now, this allosteric enzyme generally is now whenever we are dealing with a positive modulator, we are always dealing with high affinity, right? So enzyme has got high affinity for substrate, but it simply cannot go ahead without the help of allosteric effector. So high affinity means always R conformation. Mind it, this is the rule. Positive modulator will always bind to enzyme in R conformation. In other words, enzyme in R conformation has got allosteric sites for positive allosteric effectors. Okay, this is a rule. And on the other hand, taut form enzyme has got affinity, allosteric site for allosteric inhibitors. Anyway, forget it. We are dealing with positive modulators. So positive modulator will bind with the R site, R form enzyme, allosteric site of R form of enzyme. Okay, making it more reactive, more active enzyme. How? The induced fit model of Koshland, it says an enzyme and a substrate may have got different conformation, but whenever the enzyme approaches the substrate or the substrate approaches the enzyme, whenever the affinity is increasing, the active site of the enzyme will undergo conformational change and it will orient itself so that it fits the substrate. This is induced fit model, whereas the earlier lock and key model of Emil Fischer used to tell us that the enzyme should always have a complementary active site which is fixed for the substrate, which is not true. So you see here the enzyme active site is originally looking like square, whereas our substrate is looking like a triangle. So how this square is formed into a triangle? By the allosteric effector. Mind it, this is the mechanism of allosteric effectors. What they do, they bind to a site other than the active site, that is allosteric site, and they bring about a conformational change in the catalytic site. So now the catalytic site has changed from square to triangle, and then it will form an enzyme substrate complex. Okay, so from here we learned many things. Number one, the active site is not binding with the allosteric effector. The active site is reserved for substrate. The allosteric modulator is binding to the allosteric site. In case of positive allosteric modulator, the allosteric enzyme is always in R state, R form. Okay, and after binding, it brings about a conformational change, and thus enzyme substrate complex is formed, activating the enzymes. Okay, the reverse will be happening in case of inhibition, allosteric inhibitors. Okay, now if this was confusing to you, let me again elaborate in words. Allosteric activators, okay, we are not considering inhibitors for now, activators. They bind at an allosteric site which is physically separate from the catalytic site. Okay, so allosteric site and catalytic site are different. You can see these two sites are different. This is the allosteric site and this is the catalytic site, right? This binding changes the conformation of catalytic site in a way that increases the affinity of enzyme for the substrate. Okay. Next rule is activators bind more tightly to the high affinity R state of the enzyme compared to the T state. Very important. Activators will bind to R state, AR, augmented reality. You can remember in any way you want. That is, the allosteric site is open only in the R enzyme for activators, mind it. Thus, the activators increase the amount of enzyme in the active site, thereby facilitating substrate binding through their own and other subunits. However, as I told you, in contrast, allosteric inhibitors bind more tightly to the T states. Whenever we need inhibition, we need low affinity. In that case, inhibitor will bind to the T state and it will alter the conformation in such a way so that the enzyme affinity for the substrate will be lost. Simply the reverse mechanism. This is the diagram of allosteric regulation of enzyme activity. Positive allosteric inhibitor will increase the enzyme velocity and negative allosteric inhibitors will decrease the enzyme velocity. You know, since enzyme velocity is increasing and decreasing, so definitely they are altering the Km, Michaelis-Menten constant of the enzyme. But note this thing, this diagram will always be a sigmoid curve. So it can be either this or this or this, whatever it is, all of them are sigmoid. The sigmoid feature is due to presence of cooperative binding. Okay, so initially it starts slow, then it rises slowly, and then again it becomes slow. This is the characteristic of a sigmoid curve. Compared to that, if it would have been like this, the dotted line that I just drew is a rectangular hyperbola. Okay, it is not a sigmoid. So the blue one may appear like a rectangular hyperbola, but it is not. It is sigmoid. You can see the first slope is towards this side. Okay, then it is becoming like this. Okay, so two direction of slope is a characteristic of a sigmoid curve, and this we are showing the effect of allosteric activators and inhibitors in a graph which has been plotted by V against S, that is velocity against the substrate concentration. Next, after allosteric modification, we look into covalent modification. Now, covalent modification, very important. The most important one that you need to know is phosphorylation. Okay, so phosphorylation, as you know from the classes of enzyme, is done by protein kinase. So whenever there is a mechanism by phosphorylation, it is done by protein kinase, and whenever there is a dephosphorylation, it is done by protein phosphatase. Very important, kinase and phosphatase. So hexokinase is converting glucose to glucose 6-phosphate, and glucose 6-phosphatase is converting glucose 6-phosphate to glucose. Simple, kinase and phosphatase. I will give you specific examples where I will elaborate in much detail. So phosphate is bulky and negatively charged residue that interacts with other nearby amino acid and thus induces a conformational change in active site. Okay, this is the mechanism how phosphate addition or removal will affect the mechanism, enzyme activity, because it's a bulky molecule. It will interact in its own way with other nearby amino acid. This conformational change makes certain enzyme more active and other enzyme less active. Very, very, very important line. It means phosphorylation in some enzyme can make it active, and phosphorylation in some enzyme will make it inactive. Similarly, dephosphorylation in some enzyme will make it active, and dephosphorylation in some enzyme will make it inactive. Okay. This effect is reversed by a specific protein phosphatase that removes phosphate by hydrolysis. It means whenever there is phosphorylation, this effect can be reversed by specific protein phosphatase. That is what is meant over here. Now, other than phosphorylation, there are two more important covalent modification, that is acetylation and ADP ribosylation. Those two are also important. Now, let us discuss one or two words about phosphorylation. Okay, remember, phosphorylation is done by the mechanism of cyclic AMP. Okay, so whenever we are considering phosphorylation, there has to be a role of cyclic AMP, and that phosphorylation is done by hormones like glucagon, cortisol, ACTH, growth hormone, all of them, right? So generally, phosphorylation happens via another second messenger, that is cyclic AMP, and glucagon, cortisol, ACTH, growth hormone. These are the hormones that are responsible for phosphorylation. Okay, whereas dephosphorylation is generally done by one single hormone only, that is insulin. Right? So, if you think in some other way, what is the function of insulin? It lowers blood glucose. Okay, clear your mind and just think with me. Insulin will lower blood glucose. Okay, and glucagon will increase blood glucose. Now, when you are being asked about phosphorylation and dephosphorylation, examiner will simply give you a name of an enzyme, and he will ask you whether this enzyme is active or inactive in phosphorylated or dephosphorylated state. So just clear your mind and write this rule for yourself, and then you will be able to answer everything. All anabolic enzymes are active in dephosphorylated form, that is catalyzed by insulin. Okay, and all catabolic enzymes are activated in phosphorylated form, that is induced by glucagon or all other hormones, that is cortisol, ACTH, growth hormone. What did I just say? Anabolic enzyme. What is anabolism? For example, we are converting glucose to Pyruvate, you are converting glucose to glycogen. So formation of big building blocks. This is anabolism. What is catabolism? When these complex molecules are broken down to release glucose. That is, pyruvate is converted to glucose, glycogen is converted to glucose. So if you think like this, name one anabolic pathway. I can say glycogenesis, that is synthesis of glycogen. What enzyme helps in synthesis of glycogen? This may be very confusing to you because you may have not done metabolism. Okay, so just write this rule, and if you have done carbohydrate metabolism, this will be very easy for you to understand. But if you remember this rule, you will remember everything. All anabolic enzymes are activated in dephosphorylated form, and anabolic enzyme is glycogen synthase. It has to be activated in dephosphorylated form, and insulin is helping in that. Whereas catabolic enzyme, for example, enzyme that are releasing glucose, glycogenolysis, gluconeogenesis, those are activated by glucagon. So all of those enzymes are active in phosphorylated form. Okay. Now you can see glycogen phosphorylase, for example, this is an enzyme which is converting glycogen to glucose, which is anabolic. It has to be active in a phosphorylated state. Okay, so you can see fully active glycogen phosphorylase. This is phosphorylated state. If you now go to your textbook and you find out the active and inactive forms of enzyme, this will be very, very, very clear to you. It is not fixed whether phosphorylated form will be active or dephosphorylated form is active unless you understand the mechanism behind it. Insulin driven processes and enzymes which are insulin dependent, that are helped by insulin, are active in dephosphorylated form. What does insulin do? Insulin help in lowering blood glucose. So all the processes that are lowering blood glucose are active in dephosphorylated form, and all the processes that are increasing blood glucose, that is helped by glucagon, are active in phosphorylated form. This may appear complex. If it appears complex, please request in the comment section. I will make a separate video with more examples. But please wait, if you have not started carbohydrate metabolism, just write this rule and tally this knowledge until you complete carbohydrate metabolism, and then you will understand the power of this slide and what I just told you. Anyway, the next is protein-protein interaction. Now this protein-protein interaction, that is calcium calmodulin family of modulator protein and small g protein, this is a topic in itself. I will be making a whole series on mechanism of hormone action and protein-protein interaction, and all G proteins, second messengers, everything will be covered in detail in the signal transduction chapter. So just wait for it. Next is proteolytic cleavage. So proteolytic cleavage, most of you already know, that is proenzymes are broken down and converted to smaller but active form. So most proteolytic enzymes are secreted as proenzyme. They undergo breakdown, proteolytic cleavage, to form fully functional enzyme. For example, pepsinogen, trypsinogen, chymotrypsinogen. Okay, so these are all proenzymes. These are broken down into active form like trypsin, chymotrypsin, etc. Right? And as the process is irreversible, specific inhibitor is required to inactivate it. This is very important. Okay, just note this. So this proteolytic cleavage is permanent. Okay, you cannot just rejoin. You got my point? So the concept is the big enzymes are inactive, and once it is broken down, it is becoming active. So if the process would have been reversible, if the proteolytic broken parts could have joined, they would have become inactive again. So there would have been no need of any inhibitor. But here we need specific inhibitors, as the broken parts cannot join. Next, regulation of enzyme activity through changes in amount of enzyme. One of the classic example is how the rate of transcription is controlling the downstream synthesis of translation. Okay, so generally protein synthesis starts hand in hand when gene transcription has started. Okay, so protein synthesis begin with the process of gene transcription. Minded, transcription and translation are different. However, one goes hand in hand with other. What happens after gene is transcribed? The code in the messenger RNA is translated into primary amino acid and the sequence of protein, right? So in order to control this, what the genetic system do? Generally, the rate of enzyme synthesis is regulated by increase or decreasing the rate of gene transcription. So the protein, the genetic code that will code for the protein synthesis is itself controlled. So there will be no production of mRNA, or there will be more production of mRNA, and that will lead to increase or decrease in enzyme activity. So this can result in induction, that is increase, or repression, that is decrease in the enzyme activity. Next, the enzyme content of all cell can be altered through selective regulated degradation as well as through regulated synthesis. Okay, hear me out. All proteins in a cell can be degraded with characteristic half-life, and protein degradation via two specialized system, that is proteasome and caspases. It means what? Whenever we are producing an enzyme that is in the cell, okay, it cannot continue to act lifelong. So at some point of time, nature has programmed a way in which it will die, okay, natural death. If, and what are the mechanism? Number one, by proteasome and by caspases. So that is one mechanism how we can control the activity of enzyme in a cell, by calculated degradation. So the first one was synthesis, then the second one is degradation. Mind it, if we cannot control the second part, that is if we cannot control degradation, if this degradation is unregulated, the cell will become immortal and it will turn into a cancer cell. So that this mechanism is very, very, very important. All cells are destined to die and are replaced subsequently. Okay, if it does not, it becomes an immortal or cancer cell. So in today's class, we have discussed the various mechanisms that fall under conformational changes, that is allosteric enzyme, covalent modification, protein-protein interaction, and proteolytic cleavage. We have also discussed how enzyme is regulated by synthesis or by regulated protein degradation. Now, in case of these, that is regulation of rate limiting step, it will be discussed separately in metabolism classes. Feedback inhibition will be discussed separately in metabolism classes. Okay, when we are dealing with individual metabolism, then it will be much easier for you to give example. Over here, I can tell you, feedback inhibition means the product that is formed is inhibiting its own formation. That is an example of feedback inhibition. Okay, what does compartmentation means? It means in case of few processes, for example, fatty acid synthesis, you know what happens? All the enzymes are together. It has got multiple enzymes that acts one after another. So all of the enzymes are present together. That is known as fatty acid synthesis complex. Why that is present? So that if these enzymes are present at various different sites, the products would have diffused. Okay, in order to maintain high efficiency, all of the enzymes are acting together. Again, this will be very clear when we are discussing fat metabolism or lipid metabolism, specifically fatty acid synthesis. So we just keep the discussion for that class. Counter-regulatory pathways, very important. So one pathway is helping in formation of a product and another pathway is just doing the opposite. For example, glycogen synthesis and breakdown. Counter-regulatory pathways are also known as reciprocal regulation, and we will be making detailed video on reciprocal regulation when we are covering carbohydrate metabolism. One very important thing that we will be discussing in detail in enzymology lessons are tissue isoenzymes of regulatory enzymes. Okay, so in our next class, we'll be dealing that all isoenzymes or clinically diagnostic enzymes, etc. will be covering in the next lesson. So feel free to hit the comment with any query, any confusion that you have from today's class. And if you are watching this video till now and if you have watched it fully, please type this word regulation in the comment section. I thank you all for your patient hearing, and I will see you soon with another video. Till then, bye and take care.